The mansion rose like a palace against the night sky, its marble columns gleaming under the light of chandeliers that spilled through crystal windows. Black cars lined the driveway, their polished surfaces reflecting a world of excess. Guests in sequin gowns and tailored suits walked across the red carpet, welcomed by liveried staff who bowed with well-trained smiles. Inside, the orchestra played a triumphant waltz, each note carrying the weight of old money and new power. Tonight was a celebration of Henry Caldwell's billion-dollar merger, an event that promised to redefine the financial map of America. Rachel Sanders adjusted her plain uniform in the shadows near the kitchen door. Her shoes pinched her toes, worn from years of scrubbing floors that had never belonged to her. She carried a tray of champagne flutes, weaving through clusters of guests who spoke as though she were invisible. They never noticed the quiet girl with the dark hair tied back, the one whose hands bore the calluses of endless labor. For them, she was a background detail, like the polished silverware or the folded napkins, necessary but unseen. Yet, Rachel's eyes missed nothing. She saw the hollow laughter of men who congratulated each other for victories they hadn't earned. She watched women whose smiles were sharpened weapons, each glance a calculation of envy or superiority. She had worked in many houses before, but the Caldwells' world was different, grander, crueler, wrapped in velvet and hypocrisy. At the center of it all was Veronica Caldwell. She descended the staircase with the grace of a queen, her diamond necklace throwing shards of light across the ballroom. Her beauty was undeniable, but it carried an edge of danger, like glass that could cut if touched. Every woman envied her elegance. Every man admired her poise. Yet, behind the admiration, there was fear. Veronica was known not only for her wealth, but for her merciless tongue and the silent power she held over her husband's empire. Henry Caldwell followed her, a tall figure with sharp features that softened only when he looked away from his wife. He wore success like a second skin, but beneath the polished exterior lingered a quiet fatigue, the kind born from years of compromise. His marriage was a fortress of appearances, and tonight, he was once again its silent guardian. Rachel placed the tray on a table and turned, only to freeze as Veronica's eyes fell upon her. The woman's gaze slid from the maid's uniform to her tired face, and a thin smile appeared, predatory and cold. "You," Veronica said, her voice carrying across the music. The orchestra faltered, conversation stilled. Guests turned, curiosity blooming in the pause. Veronica lifted a glass of champagne and let it tilt, the golden liquid spilling onto the pale velvet of the new sofa. "This," she announced, pointing at the spreading stain, "is what happens when the help is careless. My husband spends millions, and you destroy it with your clumsy hands." Rachel felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She hadn't touched the glass, but the truth was irrelevant. Veronica wanted a spectacle, and Rachel had become the stage. Laughter rippled through the crowd, sharp and cruel, as Veronica held out a linen napkin. "Clean it. Now. With your hands," she commanded. Henry shifted, his lips parting as if to speak, but he stopped himself. His silence was heavier than the ridicule that filled the room. Rachel's fingers trembled as she knelt before 200 eyes, pressing the napkin against the fabric while champagne soaked her skin. Heat burned her cheeks, but she swallowed her pride. In a world like this, pride was a luxury she could not afford. Only one pair of eyes held no malice. Lucas Caldwell, small and restless at the edge of the room, clutched a phone in his hands. His mother's cruelty was not new to him, but tonight he pressed the record button, his young face pale in the glow of the screen. He captured everything: the spilled drink, the humiliation, the silent husband, the triumphant wife. When Rachel finally rose, Veronica leaned close enough for her perfume to sting. "After tonight," she whispered, her voice like venom, "you'll disappear from this house, one way or another." Rachel turned away, her hands damp, her dignity shredded, yet somewhere beneath the shame a flame flickered. She had endured worse, but tonight, something felt different. Tonight, humiliation carried the weight of destiny. The orchestra resumed, louder this time, drowning the murmurs. Guests returned to their conversations, already forgetting the spectacle. But fate had not forgotten. At the far end of the room, Lucas wandered toward the terrace, curiosity pulling him beyond the glittering crowd. His footsteps echoed on marble as he slipped through the doors into the cool night. Minutes later, a sharp cry split the music. Rachel spun, her heart seizing. On the terrace, glass shattered. Guests rushed toward the sound. But too late. They froze as the boy tumbled over the railing, plunging toward the pool below. His small body hit the water, thrashing once before sinking into the depths. Hundreds of witnesses gasped, their hands to their mouths, but none moved. Fear rooted them to the spot. Fear of wet clothes, of embarrassment, of being first. Rachel dropped her tray, glass exploding across the floor. Without hesitation, she tore through the crowd, her shoes flying off as she sprinted. The night air slapped her face as she dove from the edge, the cold water closing around her in a suffocating embrace. She kicked down, her hands reaching blindly until they closed around Lucas's limp form. She pulled him upward, lungs burning, and broke through the surface with a desperate gasp. Voices screamed, flashes erupted as phones filmed the scene. Rachel clutched the boy against her, her heart pounding with terror and determination. Then pain. A violent blow as her head struck the pool's edge while she dragged Lucas out. Stars burst across her vision, darkness lapping at the corners. She collapsed on the tiles, coughing water from her lungs, as the boy breathed weakly beside her. Around them, cameras rolled, capturing not only the rescue but the silence of a society that had watched without lifting a hand. And in that silence, Rachel's life changed forever. The morning after the party, the mansion stood in uneasy silence. Newspapers screamed headlines across the nation. Maid saves billionaire's son, heroine from the shadows. High society, shamed by indifference. Photos of Rachel, drenched and dazed, clutching Lucas to her chest, flooded every news channel. Reporters swarmed the gates, their cameras pointed like weapons. Rachel sat in the servants' quarters, her head still aching from the impact. A bandage circled her forehead, courtesy of the family doctor who had fussed over Lucas while barely glancing at her. She stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror, dark eyes heavy with exhaustion, hair clinging in damp strands. The world saw her now, but not as she had ever wished. To them, she was a spectacle, a symbol, a curiosity. Memories drifted uninvited, pulling her back years into the past. She was 10 again, clutching her younger sister's hand in a cramped apartment that smelled of damp plaster. Their mother worked nights. Their father had vanished into silence and shame. Rachel had been the one to rise before dawn, prepare breakfast, and whisper promises she could not keep. Promises that someday life would be gentler. But fate had been merciless. Illness had taken her sister, poverty had carved lines into her mother's face, and Rachel had stepped into a world where survival demanded sacrifice. Now, as she sat in this gilded prison, the echoes of those years returned. She had promised herself never to kneel again, never to be humiliated as her mother had been by landlords and creditors. Yet last night, she had scrubbed champagne from velvet before strangers who laughed. Shame had returned, but so had something else, the same fire that once kept her alive. Lucas appeared in the doorway, hesitant. His hair was tousled, his small frame wrapped in a sweater too fine for his careless movements. He held the phone in his hand, the one that had captured his mother's cruelty. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling between guilt and admiration. Rachel forced a smile. "Better now that you are safe." He sat beside her, eyes darting to the floor. "They wouldn't have helped me. I saw them just watching. But you didn't wait." He hesitated, then held out the phone. "I recorded everything last night. What my mom did to you. I didn't want to, but I think you'll need it." Her hand hovered over the device, uncertainty twisting in her chest. Accepting it meant stepping into a dangerous game. Rejecting it meant losing the only weapon against Veronica's power. Slowly, she took it, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Lucas," she whispered, her throat tight. "But keep this a secret. If anyone knows." "I know," he said quickly. "She'd destroy you." At that moment, the door slammed open. Veronica entered, her heels striking the floor like gunshots. She was still flawless, though her eyes burned with fury. "There you are," she hissed. "You've embarrassed this family beyond repair. Reporters are camped outside like vultures. And do you know whose fault it is? Yours." Rachel rose slowly, clutching the phone behind her. "I saved your son." "You humiliated me," Veronica snapped. Do you think the world cares about you? They only care about the scandal. And scandals die. I will make sure you do too. Her words hung in the air like poison. Lucas flinched, but said nothing. Veronica's gaze lingered on Rachel with the cold promise of war. Then she turned and left. Rachel's knees weakened, but she stood tall. For the first time, the past did not weigh her down. It steeled her. She was no longer the girl who endured in silence. She was a woman whose courage had been witnessed by an entire nation. And courage, she realized, was far more dangerous than wealth. By the end of the week, Rachel's name was known across America. Talk shows debated her bravery. Hashtags trended, praising the maid who had done what 200 guests had not. Strangers mailed flowers to the mansion gates. For the public, she was the heroine of a fairy tale. But inside the Caldwell estate, the atmosphere had turned venomous. Rachel's duties multiplied with cruel precision. Veronica assigned her the most degrading tasks, ensuring she was always within sight, always under pressure. Since you love attention, Veronica sneered one afternoon, let's see how well you scrub bathrooms. Yet the more Veronica sought to humiliate, the more Rachel grew in quiet strength. The household staff whispered their admiration, emboldened by her resilience. Henry Caldwell observed from the shadows. In boardrooms, he was decisive, commanding, feared. But at home, he was a man chained by appearances. Still, something in him stirred as he watched Rachel polish silver under the weight of insults. He remembered her leaping into the pool without hesitation, risking her life for a child that was not her own. That memory gnawed at him, forcing him to confront the cowardice of his own silence. One evening, as the mansion quieted, Henry found her in the kitchen, rinsing dishes long after the others had gone. "Rachel," he said softly. She stiffened, then turned, her eyes wary. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell." He hesitated, the distance between them both vast and fragile. "I should have spoken that night. I should have stopped her." His voice cracked with something he had not allowed himself in years: regret. Rachel's gaze softened, but her words were firm. "Silence can wound as deeply as cruelty, sir." The truth stung. He nodded, unable to deny it. "You've shown more courage than anyone in this house, including me." His hand brushed against the counter, restless. "If you ever feel unsafe, you must tell me. I will protect you." Before she could reply, Veronica's voice sliced through the hall. "Henry." The sound of her heels approached. He stepped back, the fragile moment collapsing. Veronica entered, her eyes narrowing at the sight of them together. "How touching," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "My husband and the maid. What a charming tableau." Henry's jaw tightened. Rachel lowered her eyes, but inside, her heart raced. The lines of battle were drawn more clearly now. Veronica saw the threat, and Henry felt the pull of forbidden loyalty. That night, Rachel lay awake, the phone hidden beneath her pillow. The recording of Veronica's cruelty burned like a secret flame. She thought of Lucas's trust, Henry's confession, Veronica's venom. For the first time, she understood the scale of what awaited her. This was no longer about humiliation. It was about survival. The scandal did not fade as Veronica had predicted. Instead, it deepened. News stations replayed the footage of Rachel leaping into the pool, juxtaposed with clips of wealthy guests standing frozen, their champagne glasses in hand. Commentators called it a portrait of moral decay. Every day, new voices demanded accountability from the elite who had turned away. Rachel, who had long lived in obscurity, now found herself trapped between fame and danger. Strangers sent letters calling her a hero, while tabloids clawed into her past, searching for dirt. They unearthed details of her childhood poverty, her mother's illness, her sister's death. Stories she had buried were now headlines. And with each revelation, Veronica's fury grew sharper. One evening, as Rachel finished polishing the library floor, she overheard raised voices behind the double doors. Henry's tone was controlled, but beneath it pulsed restrained anger. "You can't dismiss what she did, Veronica," he said. "Rachel saved our son's life. Lucas would be dead if not for her. Do not speak her name to me." Veronica spat. "She humiliated me before the world. Do you know what people whisper now? That I stood by while a maid acted with courage. That I am weak. That I am cruel. I will not tolerate it." Rachel froze, cloth in hand, as Veronica's next words chilled her. "She won't survive here. Accidents happen every day, slippery stairs, faulty wiring, a car that doesn't brake. One way or another, she'll be gone. Silence followed. Henry's reply came slow, deliberate. If anything happens to her, I will know who is responsible. And so will everyone else. Rachel backed away, heart hammering. The library walls pressed in around her, the chandeliers above suddenly suffocating. She had known Veronica hated her, but to hear the threat spoken aloud was something else entirely. Later that night, she slipped into the servants' quarters and locked the door. The phone with Lucas's recordings burned in her hand. Part of her wanted to march into a newsroom and expose Veronica immediately. But another part knew the danger. Veronica's power stretched deep into politics, media, and business. One misstep could end not only Rachel's livelihood, but her life. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer into the dark. She was no stranger to survival. But this time, survival meant more than enduring. It meant fighting. And for the first time, Rachel felt destiny sharpening its claws. The mansion's atmosphere thickened like a storm before lightning. Veronica grew more ruthless, striking at Rachel with petty humiliations cloaked in elegance. She demanded that Rachel serve wine in front of distinguished guests, only to accidentally spill it across her uniform. She assigned her tasks meant for 3 workers, forcing exhaustion to wear her thin. Yet beneath every act of cruelty, Veronica's eyes gleamed with something darker, fear. But Rachel was no longer alone. Small alliances began to form, fragile but real. The head chef, a stoic man who rarely spoke, began slipping Rachel extra food from the kitchen. The gardener, once indifferent, offered a quiet warning when Veronica sent her to clean near the unstable balcony railings. Even among the servants, whispers spread. She's one of us, but she stood against them. She saved the boy. Most unexpected of all was Lucas. The boy who had once hidden in corners now followed Rachel like a shadow. He found excuses to linger near her, asking questions, showing her sketches he had drawn, confiding in her with a trust he denied his own parents. "You're the only one who listens," he admitted one afternoon, his voice barely audible. "When I'm with you, I don't feel invisible." Rachel's chest tightened. She saw herself in him, lonely, overlooked, yearning for a kindness denied. She vowed silently to protect him, not only from danger, but from the crushing coldness of the world he had been born into. But not everyone welcomed her growing strength. Veronica's allies, women who thrived in the orbit of her cruelty, began spreading whispers. "She's seducing Henry," they told each other. "She's after money, status." One of them, a former employee bitterly loyal to Veronica, placed a necklace in Rachel's cleaning cart and accused her of theft. Only Lucas's defense, his insistence that he had seen the woman plant it, saved Rachel from dismissal. That evening, Henry summoned Rachel to his study. The air was thick with cigar smoke, the mahogany desk lit by a single lamp. He gestured for her to sit, his expression grave. "Rachel," he said, his voice low, "you are in danger here. My wife will not stop until you are destroyed. But I want you to know, you are not alone. You've done more for this family than most would dare. And though it may cost me everything, I will not let her harm you." Her throat tightened. Gratitude warred with fear. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers with intensity she could not ignore. "Because the world may call you a maid, but I see you for what you are, a woman braver than all of us combined." The silence that followed was charged, filled with the unspoken. For the first time, Rachel realized how deep the fractures in the Caldwell fortress ran. There were alliances forming, but also divisions that could shatter lives. And in the center of it all, she stood, a spark threatening to ignite the entire empire. The Caldwell mansion no longer felt like a house, but like a stage where every whisper carried the weight of betrayal. By now, Rachel had grown used to the piercing eyes of the press outside the gates, but inside, the real battles unfolded. One evening, as Rachel prepared the upstairs corridor, Lucas tugged at her sleeve. His eyes were wide with urgency. "You need to see this," he whispered. He led her into his room, shutting the door tight. From beneath his pillow, he pulled the phone. He tapped the screen, and Rachel's breath caught. It wasn't just the recording of her humiliation anymore. There were others. Clips of Veronica speaking with venom, her voice cold as steel. One showed her on the phone with an unknown man, her words deliberate. "Make sure the brakes fail. No mistakes this time. Another caught her berating Lucas, threatening to send him away to boarding school if he dared to speak of her actions. Rachel's hands trembled as she held the device. Proof. Evidence that could topple Veronica, perhaps even protect them. But with it came a new terror. If Veronica discovered these files, neither she nor Lucas would be safe. Why are you keeping these, Lucas? Rachel asked softly. He swallowed hard. Because no one believes me when I talk about her. You're the only one who knows. If something happens, people need to see the truth. Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them away. You're very brave, Lucas. But this is dangerous. More dangerous than you understand. I trust you, he said simply, and that trust weighed heavier than any burden she had carried before. Later that night, Rachel sat alone in the servants' quarters, staring at the screen until her eyes blurred. The evidence could save her, but it could also destroy the boy who had given it to her. Henry needed to know, yet the thought of handing him proof of his wife's monstrosity felt like betrayal of another kind. Fate made the decision for her. Veronica stormed into the quarters without warning, her fury unmasked. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed. The cameras, the sympathy, the boy clinging to you like a stray dog. But I see through you, Rachel. And I promise you, the world will too. Rachel hid the phone beneath her apron, her pulse hammering. Veronica's eyes narrowed as though she sensed something, but she said no more. She left with a slam of the door, the sound echoing like a warning. That night, Rachel lay awake, the secrets on Lucas's phone burning hotter than fire. She knew there was no turning back. Whatever choice she made, her life would never return to obscurity. The truth was out there now, alive, waiting to consume them all. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing hour, the walls around Rachel seemed to close tighter. Veronica's threats grew bolder, her manipulations more dangerous. But Rachel was no longer the silent maid who endured in shadows. She had evidence. She had Lucas's trust. And she had Henry's hesitant but undeniable support. The breaking point came during a charity gala, a glittering event meant to restore the Caldwell's tarnished image. Politicians, business moguls, and socialites filled the ballroom. Veronica played hostess with dazzling charm, her laughter echoing like crystal bells. But beneath the facade, her eyes hunted for Rachel. Rachel worked silently, refilling glasses, ignoring whispers that followed her. Yet as the evening stretched, she felt Henry's gaze upon her, a gaze not of pity, but of recognition. He knew the truth, even if he had not yet spoken it aloud. Then chaos erupted. A scream cut through the music. A chandelier above the center of the ballroom trembled, its chain half-sawed. It swayed dangerously, sparks flickering from a tampered fixture. Guests scattered in panic. But the chandelier crashed down where Rachel had stood moments earlier. Only the gardener's urgent warning, passed quietly to her earlier that day, had saved her life. The room descended into chaos. Henry rushed to her side, his hand gripping her shoulder. Are you hurt? No, she gasped, though her heart pounded. But that wasn't an accident. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, silence fell between them. He understood. Veronica had crossed the line from cruelty to attempted murder. Later, when the guests had been escorted out and the wreckage cleared, Henry led Rachel into his study. The door closed with finality. You can't stay here, he said, his voice raw. She will kill you. Rachel straightened, clutching the phone against her chest. And if I leave, she wins. She buries the truth, and Lucas suffers for it. I won't let that happen. Henry exhaled sharply, torn between fear and admiration. Then what do you propose? She met his gaze, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion carved into her features. We fight back. With the truth. The air thickened with the weight of her words. It was the first time she had spoken them aloud, the first time she had declared war. Henry nodded slowly, a decision hardening in his face. Then there's no turning back. Not for you, not for me. The lines were drawn. They had crossed into dangerous territory where betrayal, lies, and death lurked in every shadow. And for Rachel, the point of no return had arrived. The Caldwell mansion had always been a fortress of secrets, but now it felt like a battlefield. After the chandelier incident, whispers spread through the city that the glamorous Veronica Caldwell was not the paragon of elegance she pretended to be. Yet instead of retreating, Veronica struck harder. Rachel became her prime target. Rumors bloomed in tabloids. Maid seduces billionaire husband. Caldwell marriage in crisis. Anonymous sources claimed Rachel had a criminal past, that she was a con artist seeking fortune. Rachel recognized Veronica's fingerprints all over the stories, her cruelty disguised as scandal. Henry, caught in the storm, faced pressure from board members who worried that Rachel's presence was destabilizing the empire. Distance yourself, they urged. Fire her. End this circus. But Henry refused. For the first time in years, he defied expectations, not only for Rachel, but for himself. The consequences came swiftly. Veronica orchestrated a press ambush. One morning, as Rachel left the servants' entrance, a swarm of reporters descended, flashing cameras in her face. Questions flew like daggers. Are you sleeping with Henry Caldwell? Did you orchestrate Lucas's accident to look like a hero? Were you paid to humiliate Veronica Caldwell? Rachel's voice shook, but she managed only one answer. I saved a child. That's all. The clip went viral, dividing the nation further. Some saw a brave woman persecuted by the elite. Others believed Veronica's narrative, branding Rachel a manipulator. But the darkest consequence was yet to come. One night, Rachel returned to her quarters to find the window shattered. Drawers ransacked. On her bed lay a single photograph. Her sister, the one who had died years ago, defaced with red ink. Scrawled beneath, "You will join her." Rachel sank onto the floor, clutching the photograph to her chest, her body shaking. Someone had reached into her past, into her most sacred wound, and weaponized it. This was no longer just about Veronica. There were others now, enemies who had taken sides, people she did not even know. The only solace came from Lucas, who sneaked into her room that night. He wrapped his small arms around her shoulders. Don't let her win, he whispered fiercely. You're stronger than she is. Rachel held him tightly, drawing strength from his fragile loyalty. She realized the truth. She was no longer fighting only for herself. She was fighting for Lucas, for Henry, for every servant silenced by power. But victory would demand sacrifice, and the price had only begun to reveal itself. The days that followed brought a dangerous calm, like the eye of a storm. Veronica appeared in public smiling, attending galas and luncheons, as though the scandals had never touched her. But behind closed doors, she seethed. She had underestimated Rachel, and she knew it. Rachel, meanwhile, clung to the recordings Lucas had entrusted to her. They were her shield, her last line of defense. Yet carrying them also meant living with constant fear. Every time she felt footsteps behind her, every shadow in the hallway, she wondered if Veronica, or someone working for her, was about to strike. It was during one of those tense evenings that Henry called Rachel into his study. He looked older, his shoulders heavy with exhaustion. There's something you need to know, he began, pouring himself a drink he did not touch. When Veronica and I married, it wasn't for love. It was for power. She saved my company from collapse, but in return, I gave her my life. And she has never let me forget it. Rachel listened, silent, her heart aching at the confession. Henry's eyes met hers, and for a moment, the mask slipped. She saw the man beneath, the one who longed for freedom, for truth, for dignity. But before she could answer, the door creaked open. Lucas slipped inside, pale and nervous. I need to show you something, he stammered. He handed Rachel his phone. This time, the recording was different. It was older, buried deep in hidden files. Rachel pressed play. The voice that filled the room was Veronica's, low and venomous. If Rachel doesn't disappear, she'll end up like her sister. I've dealt with people before. No one asks questions when the poor die. Rachel's knees weakened. The room spun as old wounds tore open. Her sister, her death had always been explained as illness, a tragedy of poverty. But now, the possibility that Veronica had played a hand in it struck like lightning. Henry swore under his breath, slamming his glass onto the desk. This ends now. She's crossed a line no one comes back from. Tears blurred Rachel's vision, rage and grief colliding in her chest. All these years, she had carried guilt for failing her sister. And now she faced the possibility that it had not been fate, but malice. Lucas clutched her hand, his small fingers trembling. You can't let her win, he whispered. Rachel lifted her head, eyes burning with a fire she had never known. For the first time, she understood the full scope of Veronica's cruelty. Not just humiliation, not just threats, but destruction of lives, past and present. The truth had been buried for years. Now it had clawed its way back to the surface, and nothing would ever be the same. Months later, the mansion felt transformed. Where once there had been fear, there was now light. Rachel walked through the halls not as a servant, but as Henry's wife, her simple dress replaced by one of quiet elegance. The newspapers now called her the people's heroine, a woman who had turned scandal into hope. Lucas beamed at her side, thriving under her care, his laughter filling rooms once heavy with tension. And Henry, free at last from the chains of a loveless marriage, stood beside her not as a master, but as a partner. Together, they began programs to help the poor, funding schools, hospitals, and shelters. Rachel's story became a beacon, a reminder that courage could topple empires of hypocrisy. Veronica's fate was different. Stripped of wealth and power, she faced prison for her crimes. Yet when she emerged years later, hardened but human, Rachel was waiting. In a modest community center funded by the Caldwells, Veronica arrived in a plain uniform, the role of a cleaner, the very station she had once despised. At first, bitterness clung to her, but under Rachel's watch, something shifted. The woman who had once ruled with cruelty learned the weight of humility, step by step, task by task. One evening, Rachel approached her as the day's work ended. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said gently. "Even you." For the first time, Veronica's eyes softened, tears brimming. "Why?" she whispered. Rachel smiled, her voice steady. "Because forgiveness is stronger than revenge." The two women stood in silence, the past heavy between them, but no longer unbridgeable. Redemption had found a way, not in wealth or power, but in compassion. And so the story closed, not with vengeance, but with transformation. Rachel had saved a child, but more than that, she had saved herself, Henry, and even her enemy. Her legacy was not only courage in the face of cruelty, but the proof that love, dignity, and forgiveness could rebuild even the most broken of lives. If you made it this far, leave us a comment telling us where you're watching from today and what you thought of the story. If you can, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to receive new videos. A big hug, and see you tomorrow.